Good morning. Welcome to Wednesday. I hope you are having a blessed morning or afternoon or whenever you're watching this. But daily devotions today. We're going to continue our journey through Matthew chapter 22, starting at verse 15, with this story of the Pharisees and Herodians trying to entrap Jesus in what he says and get him in trouble with the Romans or in trouble with the Jewish people who are pretty much behind him as he has ridden into the city and cleansed the temple. And everyone's excited, and they're all saying the Messiah, and they're still trying to figure out what that means. So we're going to continue that journey today. So yesterday, if you were here, I talked about being trapped by the world on one side, things of God on the other, and that sometimes those things they don't coincide. They're not the same, and to do one has to eliminate the other one as an option, or else you're bound to do what the world requires and demands, and it might not be ethical, and it might not be obviously what God would want. It's wrong. And yet, how do you balance those things out? How do you make changes? We talked about just being trapped in that way, and that God's with us and all that. Today, I want to talk about, though, how we are free. I ended yesterday with the renewing of our minds so that we can discern what's the will of God, and so we kind of have that leading us into this section, which is from Romans chapter 12, was what that's from. So I want to look at the story again, and I want to point out a couple things and connect them to why and how we are free in Christ, how you are free in Christ even though you're bound by the world. Okay, so Matthew 22, and I'm going to actually read the story again. I don't do that all the time, but verse 15. Then the Pharisees went and plotted to entrap him in what he said. So they sent their disciples to him, along with the Herodians, saying, Teacher, we know that you are sincere, and teach the way of God in accordance with the truth, and show deference to no one. For you do not regard people with partiality. Tell us then what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not? But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, Why are you putting me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin used for the tax. And they brought him a denarius. Then he said to them, Whose head is this, and whose title? They answered, The emperor's. Then he said to them, Give therefore to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and to God the things that are God's. When they heard this, they were amazed, and they left him and went away. So, the coin. I talked about it in my sermon on Sunday. That denarius coin, governments printed money. They printed it for various reasons, obviously for economic transactions, but also to let them know who's in charge, who's controlling the economy, who has their life in their hands. And so this particular coin had a picture of the emperor on one side that said Emperor Tiberius, son of God. That's pretty clear why it's idolatrous in the Jewish mind, because the emperor's claiming to be God's son. But think about the political implications of Jesus when Jesus says he's the son of God, or when people wonder if he's the son of God. You have to see the politic in this text and in Matthew's whole gospel, and how that's just a thing, and it's a big deal that this is the politic of Jesus the Christ, the Son of God, standing over and against the politics of the world and the kingdom of the world, and somehow interacting with it and dealing with it and transforming it and being broken by it, because it's ultimately political maneuvering that kills Jesus. But we're talking about freedom, so let's just do that again. So the emperor's head is on one side that says Son of God, and on the other side there's a woman. I think she's holding a branch or something, but it says High Priest, and the idea is that the emperor is the high priest of the empire, and that's really significant. I mean, you have essentially the empire is the religion is the empire. You are called as a Roman, whatever you are, Roman citizen, a occupied country, to worship the empire and use your life in its service. Well, oddly enough, that's the same thing Jesus tells us to do, only in terms of God. And the promise that I want us to hear today in terms of being free is connected to the coin. Jesus says, "Show me a coin." And so they bring him this coin, and he looks at it, and he says, "Whose image?" Now, if you read the text, our text says, "Whose head is this?" and "Whose title?" That works for our English understanding, but in Greek the word's icon. Whose icon? And it would almost be translated better as image. Whose image? Whose picture? But image is going to work for us. And what I want to do is jump then to give to the emperor what's the emperor. So fine, give to the emperor what's the emperor's. But then Jesus says, give to God what is God's. And now I want to talk about that word image. And I want to go all the way back to the beginning. And by the beginning, I mean the beginning, like Genesis beginning. And I just touched on this on Sunday a little bit, but it's Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. It's at the end of the first creation cycle. And just listen. Then God said, "Let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth." So God created humankind in God's image. In the image of God he created them, male and female God created them. God blessed them, and then you know the story. So just hold that up. That the empire of the world prints its worldly leaders, imprints its worldly gods and its idols on everything. And we have to be very discerning as people of God to figure out what that is. But we're free to do it and to make mistakes and all of that because of this right here. Because it's God who made you in God's image. And so while all these other things are out there, you are in the image of God. And you have God's image printed right on you. And that's a promise that you live into with your life so that you can be free to live and move and act and do your best to discern what God would want. Do your best to find out what you're bound to try to let it go, to find out what gives you life, to live into it, to look out at the world as someone who bears Christ's image and live into that. Realize that you're loved before you've done anything good or before you've done anything bad, and certainly after, through Jesus Christ. And that sets us free then to live in the world, knowing that we live under God's grace all the time. And so that's your promise that I want you to take with you today, is that you are in the image of God. And when Jesus says give to God's what's God's, I think what he's trying to get at is give yourself to God. Give to the empire whatever the empire needs. God's working there too, but give yourself to God, because God has you already. I hope you have a blessed day.